to the television show Education in Africa. I'm your host Sally, and today's topic is Education for All in Africa. Not catching up, but setting the pace. First of all, let's talk about the context. As we've known, Africa has over 54 countries, so it does have some shared patterns in education, but we have to keep in mind that there is also diversity because various countries might have various issues. And since 1950s and 1960s, a lot of African countries got independent. They were used to be the colonized areas of Europe. So decolonization is a new pattern in Africa since 1950s and 1960s. And there are few educated and a very low literacy among African countries after the independence. And there's a very serious and severe problem across all African countries, which I use the very large size word here on this slide, which is, as we've known, poverty. Yeah, we have to keep in mind when we come to the issue of education, poverty always relates with all the issues in Africa. Okay, poverty. So the tribal African people don't even have enough money to cover their body as a way to remember how serious the poverty issue is in Africa. And also this poor Africa kid doesn't have hygiene water to get a bath, and it just in this environment and just take a bath like this. And also the classroom, or no classroom at all for these poor African children. Okay, now let's talk about the function, goal, or the role of education in Africa. So, the new country just got developed as a newly developed and newly established countries, and the hope is high, the commitment is high. They want to use education as a developmental engine to eliminate poverty and close the gap between the most and least affluent countries. And there are two opposing views about the role of education in Africa. One is transformative, the other is instrumental. So here is a skew, and you could see that one view is absolutely dominant in Africa, and I think everyone could make an educated guess which view is dominated in Africa. And the transformative view focuses on education as a vehicle for social change, and instrumental view focus on education as a a tool to train some workforce, to train some skills, and just to prepare the world of work. And also education's role in Africa is more oriented toward human capital theory as to investment in a country's future. And the production of workforce is like, education is a production system and a delivery system, the transmission of knowledge and the information. Okay, now let's talk about the post-colonial leadership and education. And here, the beautiful picture, the windmill, and everything looks promising and beautiful. And yeah, it has some achievements of the African government about education after they got independent. And let's cheer on the achievements first, okay? There are three major ones I summarize here. The first I want to talk about is the expanded access. So it's a popular demand of anti-colonial nationalist movement. Now we're independent, okay, we have to educate all the population to be a more democratic society. So expanded access, especially for the primary school, is very popular. And the government did something to improve the enrollment rates, and also the literacy rates got increased hugely. And the African governments also opened schools in urban neighborhoods and in rural villages. Okay, the second commitment of Africa's post-colonial leadership was desegregated schools and curriculum. So after the country got independent, the formal racial restrictions were eliminated, and also the informal barriers were weakened, which sounds very cool, right? And the senior civil servants and other more affluent Africans moved into formerly white neighborhoods and sent their children to elite schools. Wow, nice. And the third commitment is to address the inequalities and injustices. Okay, so first we'll have to differentiate two terms. One is equity, the other is equality. So equity has to do with fairness and injustice. So the equality has to do with sameness. They have some common points, but they are a little bit different. So after the post-colonial leadership did something to the education to improve the education, they did achieve something very good, which is the base of the education pyramid has broadened. So basically, it's just the primary school. They did something to improve the primary enrollments, and they got partially succeeded in gender equality and equity. The literacy rates increased. Progress has made clearly toward equal gender access to primary school. Ooh, now comes to the dark side. Blackboard. Okay, now let's talk about problems. Okay, first problem is for many African countries, as we've talked earlier, primary enrollment rates improved. But in 1980s and 1990s, they got stagnated, even declined. It showed the inability of government to meet commitment to move towards schooling for all citizens. And it has high attrition. So some people in the first place got enrolled in the primary education, but they drop out. And expanded access to school is now readily translated into learning for all. So yeah, the equation is now, you go to school and doesn't mean that you learn something.